right. We're broadcasting live because we borrowed a little something from Corey T, right? And so we welcome those folks. And we also like to give a special thanks to Ms. Poirier, Dr. Castro, who's the principal of the school, for letting us come out and host this event in her beautiful high school. All right. So today we're here to discuss government and education. You know, many of us, we kind of know that government has a big impact on education, but we wanted to get a few folk together to kind of talk about its impact. Now, as we were billed to have a few more of our elected officials here, as Murphy's Law states, right? Sometimes things go wrong. We had our assembly man and woman from our 35th district, Benji Lindley and Shalana Sumter, actually on the way. They actually were called back for a vote on the Atlantic City issue, which, as you know, is a big issue. So I think they just finished up, so they're on the way. Hope they can join us at some point in the program. And our freeholder director, TJ Best, he took a busload of children down to the Capitol the other day, and they're stuck in Maryland. I guess something happened to the bus, and so he won't. They're not leaving again until 6 o'clock this evening. He won't go until 9 o'clock. So we're fortunate to have our city council president and newly elected councilman Bill McCoy here with us. That happened here, and of course our Dr. Don Hodges, a former board president, and Dr. Hodges is probably, I guess, he and Commissioner Carr are neck and neck running for the longest running school board official to date. So we're appreciative that you came out. So let's get started. So first, this is not a candidate's night, okay? So we're just here to talk about the role government plays in education. So as a bit of an icebreaker, I'd like the panelists to just talk a little bit about themselves, the connection to Patterson, and I want to ask them, what do you love most about Patterson, our beloved city?
Thank you, Kemper, for the opportunity to be here and for that warm introduction to the parents and students that are here. It's certainly a pleasure to be with you this evening, and we know that our panel is short this evening, but we hope that we'll be able to give you our perspective on the issues. It's a critical issue as it relates to education and the role of government. We know that education is the primary responsibility of the state, and the Constitution supports that and requires it. As we go further, we'll talk a little bit more about those issues. As you know, I'm Bill McCoy. I'm the current council president of the City Council, the longest serving councilman. They call me the dean of the council. I'm in my 5th term representing the 3rd Ward. I've lived in Patterson for 40-something years. Graduated from John F. Kennedy High School in 1975 and went on to William Patterson College then, and now William Patterson University. Accounting is my background, and I was one of the few folks that graduated with that degree from William Patterson, and went on to work for New Jersey Bell then, now translated many years later to Verizon. Left Verizon, I'm actually in the school district. I'm in Jersey Board of Education, working with our 3- and 4-year-old program, which I believe is a fundamental key role in ensuring that our youngsters in urban centers get the thorough and efficient education that they need. And I think it's very critical that we start those preschoolers off correctly, and all studies and data have shown that there's a vast improvement and a vast growth that occurs when those young people are introduced to education at an early age. Also, the nature of the education is more inquisitive and exploratory. Much to my wife's chagrin, she's from the old school where you go by rote, and we now know that while rote learning is effective, exploratory learning and having kids learn based on their interests is even more effective and impactful. So it's for us to create a safe environment for children where they can learn and grow. That's my background. I am married to, as I said, my wife, Brenda McCoy, for 33 years.
Get that.
That's important. And we have 3 children. And I now have 3 grandchildren, if you can believe it. That's a frightening proposition. I just got out of high school not too long ago, and now I'm a grandfather. That can be very scary. Patterson is a great town. The thing I like about Patterson, it gives everyone an opportunity. It's an emerging kind of cities with a vast diversity of people, food and culture. And if you can make it in Patterson, you can make it anywhere. And I proved that by coming out of Patterson to William Patterson, where I did not have all of the advantage of the folks that were there. But as we explored the STEM program, I was one of the early guinea pigs of STEM at John F. Kennedy with Jane Silverstein, great teacher.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have it too.
A fantastic teacher, and I tell folks all the time, we have this debate about, are you from Patterson? You look like me and all of that. If you have a love for children, and if you have a heart for children, doesn't matter your background or culture, you can teach. And Silverstein, more than all, let you know that she cared about you, that you were important, and in fact that you can and will learn if you follow directions. And she had fun doing it. She was one of those folks that didn't mind getting down on the floor and doing all those silly, crazy things that kids do, and allow you to identify with her. The other person that changed my life, and I always talk about it, is Miss Sharon Smith. I might have been in the penal system had it not been for her. My very first day at John F. Kennedy, this huge, humongous complex that was very overwhelming. I'm still looking for the pool that I was told was on the roof.
Who told you that? Mr. Moody?
And so my very first day, I had an altercation because unlike the way I speak now, back then I had a very nice Caribbean accent that everybody thought was so funny. And so we had this conversation, and Mrs. Smith rescued me and told me to report back to her after school. That's when teachers stay after school. They didn't leave the parking lot at 245 going 60 miles an hour.
I'm not going to touch that.
They actually hung out after school, and so it explained to me, reinforced over here, ladies and gentlemen, that's fantastic. Yeah, Senator is coming, and so she helped me to understand how it is that I need to navigate high school and the things I need to do. And as a result of that, we became not only a teacher and student, but after I graduated, we became friends, such that Sharon Smith sang at my wedding, and she also sang at my 25th wedding anniversary. So we still have that ongoing relationship, and I miss that, to see that youngsters today may not have that opportunity to be that close to their teachers and administrators in the same way that I have. We need to work on that. Kids learn if they believe you believe in them. You show them that you care about them. The most fundamental principle of teaching, and I don't think you get that in any college or university, but it's a definite fact and experience that I have that helped me to be where I am today.
So just as a way of announcement, we've been joined by our Senator Nellie Poe, who's probably we told the audience that they pulled the Atlantic City vote this evening. Some of I think some in Wimberley and Sumter on the way, and I know probably broke the sound barrier, but we're just introducing ourselves and tell a little about yourself. And I think Dr. Hodges has been thinking about what would he say about himself, and then what you love most about Patterson.
Well, you hear me? I don't think so. Well, I'll speak first.
All right. And then we'll turn it down.
All right. I'm not from Patterson. I came to Patterson in 1987 to do my heavy practice residency in St. Joe's Hospital. My plans were to come here, spend 3 years, do my residency, and then hit the road. I'm from New York City, and New Yorkers have this unfortunate view of Jersey and citizens, I'll put it that way. And I had no intentions of counting amongst that group. However, when I was growing up, I had to essentially steal one of the education in this country. I had to break the law and use false addresses to go to white schools, because the schools in my neighborhood were inadequate, and my parents made an effort to check the schools. They would compare the science books in both schools and say, oh no, they thought it would be like Dick and Jane versus Shakespeare. It was that, and I'm talking about 4th grade. It was seriously a challenge. So we had to do other things to make sure that my sister and myself were educated. And when I came to Patterson and I encountered Pattersonian students in the emergency room, and I saw what appeared to be the level of education that was not where it should be. Students really couldn't engage in a strong conversation. The grammar was really challenged. And then worst of all, I watched kids die. I watched kids choose to be out on the street as opposed to pursue a higher education. They weren't, kids I spoke to, I think that number was 91% were football players. I didn't hear about doctors at all, or chemists, or engineering. I didn't hear anything. I used to ask these kids before the emergency room got split up into pediatrics versus the rest of the emergency room. The young ladies, well, there were a few pediatricians. Every girl wants to be a pediatrician when she's 10 or 11 or 12. But you didn't hear this, the accountants, you didn't hear even a politician or a leader, you didn't hear any of it. So it was so startling that I wanted to get engaged in the educational process, and that brought me to the school system, where I began to see some of the struggles and the challenges that the administration at that time was engaged in. In fact, Mr. McCoy beat me for a school board member the first time I ran.
That was many years ago.
Many years ago. Because I thought that it's extremely important to get a solid education. And with that, you can do anything. Nobody can stop you. But if you aren't given that key, if you're not allowed that opportunity, then where you can go, what your options are in the future are extremely limited. So given my history, and I realized where I came from, my friends are dead. They didn't make it. They did not make it, even though they lived in an upper class, that point of view, a relatively upper class neighborhood. The school was so terrible, and their parents didn't go check. I lived blocks away from James Brown and Count Basie. I'm talking about blocks. We walked past his house on a regular basis. And those kids whose families owned their homes back in the 60s, these were black professionals who owned their homes back in the 60s. Their children did not attain the same kinds of achievements that they did because of their school system. So it was important to me when I came here and I got immersed in the community to try to give something back, to make sure that what happened to me didn't have to happen to somebody else. And what I also found is that you have bright children here. You really do. And that's the great sadness. You have bright children whose potentials are not being realized because we're not giving them, and as a community, we're not delivering to them the best educational options possible. So why I'm here because I'm determined to make sure that changes in the future.
So now that you're here, what do you love best about Patterson and maybe Jersey, since you kind of listen on your
New Yorkers here like to very I think this city is a historic city. And I don't think that we spend enough time teaching our students what you had here. You had a vice president who used to live right there on Carroll and Broadway. You've got industry, kings of industry used to reside here and did business here, which helped drive the rest of this nation. There's just the falls and the whole idea around it and what it did for this city, this community, and for the state. You really don't understand and appreciate it unless you come from outside and you see it and you're told, oh my gosh, this is where it all started.
Right, that's right.
So those are the things that I enjoy and appreciate the most, alongside the variety and diversity of these people.
Senator Puff.
Thank you so very much. First and foremost, let me just say that I was just catching my breath as I was asked to come forward to the podium. I am very happy to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. Today was a very, very busy day in Trenton, and as our host has indicated, my colleagues, both Assemblywoman Sumter and Assemblyman Wimberly, are in transit right now, attempting to get here to also possibly join us. Hopefully they'll be able to make it in time. Both the Senate and the Assembly were in session today. This was not one of our regularly scheduled sessions. As it was pointed out, there were a number of different legislative bills that were placed on the agenda for the session, and as such, the Atlantic City, much of which many of you may have either read in the papers or certainly heard in the news, what has had a great deal of controversy following it. I would like to make mention that fortunately today that bill did in fact get through both houses, and the bill was slightly amended and was able to ensure that some of the concerns that were raised were indeed dealt with and appropriately addressed.
So while we have here, what was one of the major, victories that came out of that bill today?
Well, I'm going to use the word amendments because the victory is yet to happen.
Okay.
And, we still have to, like children in school, the report card day, it's not there yet. We're not quite there. We're in that evaluation process. They're going to have to start working towards that. But here are the two things that was indeed, that there was an amendment towards reducing the amount of time that, pardon me, extending the amount of time that the Atlantic City would be able to have to allow them to stabilize their municipal budget.
Yeah.
And secondly, most importantly, or not most importantly, but equally importantly, there was some language that allows for the protection of some of those collective bargaining units that was concerned, was discussed and we were all concerned about. And that language allows for the municipality to be able to maintain that until such time they're able to meet their requirement. 150 days that they have towards making sure that they submit a plan, a budget that will stabilize their budget that will stabilize their budget. And fortunately or hopefully they'll be able to do that, and should they not do that, that's going to put into effect certain ticker dates that will allow them to change the process. So I think everybody seems to be very happy about that. But let me bring it back to Patterson. But I did want to express my I asked for, I wanted to give an explanation as to why I got here so late. I literally just got into Patterson from Trenton right now. And I'm very happy to be here because Patterson is my hometown. I was born and raised in Patterson. I lived in Patterson practically all my life. I attended the Patterson Public School District, graduated from Kennedy High School, attended, let me go back a little bit, attended school number 2, graduated from school number 2, but I lived not too far away from here. And school number 3, back in the days when I was a little girl, certainly no longer the case, but back in the days when I was a little girl, it only went up to the 4th grade. So we then had to transfer to another school. And so I'm from this neighborhood, actually. This is where I grew up, and until I got married and went to the east side section. I was actually, it's really the I lived in the east side section, but then went on to Lakeview Avenue and raised a family there. Patterson is home to me. I am happy to say that a lot of what got me started was wanting to make sure that I was able to do something that was going to be able to continue to meet the needs and serve our community, our entire Patterson community. My mom and dad were very hardworking people. Like many of your dads and moms, I'm sure, you can all speak in terms of what your upbringing was. Well, for my mom was a seamstress, and she was, and my father was a very crafty carpenter, but a self-taught carpenter. And they didn't go to school for very long. My mom had just a 6th grade school education, and my dad had just a 5th grade education. And clearly, for them, the most important thing for them was to making sure that they were able to provide a loving and caring home environment to take care of their children so that they can have a better future and a better education than what they were afforded to at the time. So education was very important to my parents. As such, I was the first member in my family to go to college. And then, of course, thereafter, things like kind of followed and changed. But I will tell you that for me, education is so important, and education in our family and education for our children is so, so vital. How we married the two together, education and government, is a very important topic for today's discussion. And with your permission, if I may, I'd like to say that the two really go hand in hand clearly. Everything that we're doing today has an impact on the lives of our children and those to come, because we're not just talking about the children that are born today and are here with us and those that are attending our school system, but we want to make sure that we prepare and take care of our children in the future, right? The children that are yet to be born, that we have a school system and an educational system that indeed is working to protect our families. And the only way to do that is to make sure that government, that laws in this state, laws in this country, but then right now, here today, we have the ability, right now, we have 3 layers of different branches of government at the podium at the moment. You have myself as your state senator working on state legislative laws. You have our commissioner of education of our local public school commissioner that works on making sure that each and every one of those provisions are carefully reviewed, consented to, changed, enhanced, and work towards the betterment of an educational system. And then you have our municipal council, and more importantly, the person that is at the podium is the council president, that really sets the agenda for the municipal council and all of those things that are going to pass. Without government and without a working partnership, many of the things that are important to the parents that are here, and I want to commend the parents that are here, because you've taken the time to come to listen and to be part of this dialogue. It's important because I know you care about your children, not to say those that cannot join us and who are either listening or will be viewing this. We invite you also to share your viewpoints with us, because we as legislators learned a great deal from all of you of what is most important at the time and what it is that you feel we ought to be doing. So thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this program, and I'm happy to continue the engagement of our discussion.
Great. So we're going to double back, because I'm going to talk some more about your various roles and where you sit and how it impacts education even here in Patterson. But I want to maybe go to a basic notion, just to get your views, and this in no particular order. In your opinion, what is a quality education? Because we always talk about we want our children to get a quality education. And our crew is asking us to speak louder, right? Okay. So, but tell our audience, in your opinion, what does a quality education look like? What does it entail? Anyway,
Well, let me just real quickly, only because I have the mic in my hand at the
All right.
moment. How's that? And then I'm going to pass it on to our distinguished commissioner here over. Let me just say that a good quality education for all of us, the most important part is that a couple of things I would say, and I don't think that it really stops in any one different category. There's a continuation, but I think if we have to begin with one, first and foremost, we need to make sure that we have the resources necessary in place, that we have the trained and skilled professionals to be able to provide us the educational level that we want our children, and that our children have the appropriate and adequate learning environment that they feel that they're able to learn and learn well. When we think in terms of our educational system, we want to make sure that our children are going to schools in an environment that's going to provide them with the suitable learning experience, and that starts in the classroom. It starts with making sure that a child feels safe, that a child feels that he or she is being a part of something that is important, and that they care about him, and that we care, and that everyone, both the parent, the child, as well as the faculty, and us, all of us, those that are in positions to make decisions, are making those decisions in a way that best suits the ability for us to carry out that task. Without those resources, a child cannot engage and compete on a global level, because we want to prepare our children not just for just the passing level, right? We want to be able to prepare them for what their fullest potential capability is at. And the only way to do that is to allow that incredible mind to be able to explore the impossibility. But if we don't make that learning environment suitable for that type of learning or thinking, and allow for that critical thinking to take place, we will not be able to achieve that. So for me, that's what is so important. Sometimes, while money is absolutely important, money is not the only thing. We want to make sure that we have well-prepared and capable individuals that are providing them those learning experiences. And that starts at every level, whether it's some of your most basic instructional level to the most highest and most competing level of learning, allowing them to really explore what God has given them the ability to do.
Thank you. You all know this is a cell phone. When I was growing up, we didn't have these. We were not able to walk around with the phone in the hand. We didn't have the computer that this runs on. We didn't have the Wi-Fi that the signal travels on. The only thing that we had floating through the air were radio waves. And this is way past radio waves. Somebody, some people, some group of people made these things. They worked out the scientific ideas around how these things work, and they implemented that science and turned it into something of value that we recognize as a cell phone. It's not just a phone, it's a camera, it's a GPS unit, on and on and on and on. What I think a good education is the ability for our students to go to that next, to take this to the next level, the ability to solve the next century's problems, to come up with their own unique solutions. We walk around here with a small laser pointer, but when I was going to school, a laser was built to the size of a collector. They weren't the size of a pointer. You took a whole classroom to generate that very same laser light. But some people got together and figured out how to transistorize, miniaturize the components. It took training and education to develop ideas to solve the problems, to make those things into a smaller and then more portable and settable unit. We need our children to be in the vanguard of those problem solvers. We need our students to have the capabilities to master and control the scientific knowledge, and indeed create new knowledge of their own, to which to create, again, other ideas, maybe mastering the oceans, moving through the frontiers of space, going further and further out, finding complex solutions to the challenges here of declining natural resources, climate control, on and on and on and on. Things that make our lives better. That's what starts in those classrooms. Getting the understanding of how things work, how you solve problems, how you create your own ideas, and how you work with others to bring those ideas to fruition. That's what education is. And the more we are able to impart that understanding to our children, the earlier we're able to do that, the better the educational opportunity for them. We're not alone in this world, in this country. We're competing globally. And to have a quality education means you must operate at that level globally. You have to be able to compete globally in a marketplace of ideas. You must be able to function in a whole new arenas that we don't even see yet. I mean, years ago, we used to have buggy whips for horse and buggy carriages. That doesn't exist anymore. So we're going to have computers and robots coming in, which are not here today. They're doing different things. Somebody has to design that. Somebody has to program them. Somebody has to fix them when they break. And those challenges, those plans, those ideas, those problems are going to have to be solved by somebody. And that somebody should be the children of Patterson. So that's what I'm looking for. Not I need you to know when Columbus landed in the Americas. No, that's good too. But we need you to take it to a higher level. We need you to take it to how he got here, but then how you get to Jupiter, how you get to Pluto, how you get to Alpha Centauri and beyond. Those are the things, the ideas we want our children to wrestle with and begin to solve today, because tomorrow comes a lot sooner than we think.
Wow. And that's the bridge that I like to walk over for you in your mind, that the state constitution speaks about thorough and efficient education. It did not have it as a fixed definition or fixed time and place. What it means is thorough and efficient for today. Unlike Senator Poe's parents, who got to the 5th grade, my dad got to the 3rd grade. Now, I don't know what they were teaching in the 3rd grade back then, but it was excellent, because he is the smartest guy that I know. And he worked as a plant manager for an entire company, and was one of the first persons who got an incentive bonus, which was a big piece of property, a house with running water and lights when everybody didn't have that, and was able to pay off, and this is my goal in life, was able to pay off a 30-year mortgage in 3 years. Now, I have a 30-year mortgage, and I'm on year 28. I got 28 more years to go, and I've been living there for over 21 years. You can figure that out, how that works, but that's our society. But a quality education means that you are able to compete and to solve the problems of today, which means you must be given all of the resources. Now, I want to contrast with you the difference in technology that Dr. Hodges speak about, which is a telephone, a cell phone, and I have mine there. Nowadays, they're no further than 3 feet away from you, because it has your entire life in it. I had a Palm Pilot before that had my schedule and only. This has a calculator, tells you the temperature, tells you the weather, phone, the whole 9 yards. Your heartbeat and heart rate is being monitored all through your phone. But contrast that to a pencil. Look at a pencil. Such a great design from the original institution of a pencil. Hasn't changed much. Number 2 pencil. The chisel changed, but it was a slate stone scratched on another stone. And they placed it in wood, call it a pencil. We still have the number 2 pencil today, like you had in your childhood, and maybe it will all be a long time. You have mechanical pencils, but they seem not, the number 2 pencil still reigns and still has a function. We have to live in both worlds. We have to understand the fundamental and rudimental issues that exist in the past, our history. We do need to know when the ships sail and all of that. It's important. But we also have to grasp the new environment and the new technology where we are and be able to translate that. I give the example all the time. And it irks me, because when I was on the Board of Education back in 97, the state came in to Patterson and said that we need 10 to 12 new schools. Back then, we needed 10 new schools, because our town had some of the oldest school buildings, because we was an original town, that first organized city, and so we had some old buildings. And we still do. Buildings that should have been taken offline a long, long time ago. We have only been up to, what now, 4 or 5? 5, okay? And it's almost 20 years later. That's a problem. And within all of those new schools, my pet peeve is there is no Olympic-sized swimming pool. Now, I was looking for the pool when I first went to Kennedy, and I'm still looking for it now. Why is that important? I contrast that to Passaic County Tech. Passaic County Tech does have an Olympic-sized swimming pool. And I'm speaking to thorough and efficient education. I'm speaking to the issue of receiving a quality education for today. A child in Patterson will unlikely to grow up to be an Olympic swimmer, champion. Why? You can't learn to swim in a bathtub to be an Olympic swimmer. You need an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and we don't have one. If you go to Tech, it's possible. Not guaranteed, but it's possible. We have an Olympic boxer, female boxer, that I got the news today, passed the first round and is looking to get the gold medal in boxing. Why? Because she had a gym. And her dad took her to the gym and trying to introduce her to exercise and all of that, and guess what? She loved it. And now she's competing at the highest level in the country, and to be an Olympian. We need to provide that same opportunity to every single child. Not every single child with grassland, but we have to compete not only locally, but globally. The phone will bring you any friend you want on Facebook in any place in the world, and it's just like the person is next door. And that's where the world is making much smaller, and we have to be that. Language, very important. I only speak 2 languages. One is not recognized, and the other is English broken. But we need to understand the language of the world and be able to interact and dialogue with others. So that's very, very important. So what does a good education mean? We know what it means. Just go across the bridge to Wayne or to Ridgewood, and you'll see what it means. And it's unfortunate that the state has put us in a vice, being an urban center, and tag the quality of education to your zip code or how well your parents are doing. That is not the obligation. Every child, regardless of the station of their parents, ought to have access to a quality education. That is the equalizer, that's the escalator to success, and we need to fight for that to make sure that that happens. While we're waiting, it still behooves us as parents, as the first teachers, to make sure that we're introducing our children to education and get them to our preschool program. And I talk about the difference between rote learning and exploratory learning, learn your interest, and those are the kinds of early neuron connections that we need to make in children's mind, so they doesn't see things the way it is, but they see it as the way it should be, or the way it could be, or look at possibilities. Going to the moon, no one has ever done that before. Take somebody with some creative ideas, an incentive to make sure that that happens. Dr. Hodges speaks about his early experience and he says it this way, I think, to products, that he had to steal his education. And I think he used that analogy to point out to us how important an education is, that even if you have to go out and steal it, you need to get it. And it's sad that we have it in front of us and we walk away from it. Being a basketball player or playing in the NBA is fantastic, but the likelihood that you will get there is very limited. You'd be more easily get to be a doctor than an NBA player. But too many of our children are not focused in that direction. And I give you my last example as I transition as to what is a quality education. I told you that I'm an accountant by training, and I got the notion that I could do accounting because my brother was a bookkeeper, and I translate that into accounting. When I went to John F. Kennedy High School and told my guidance counselor that I wanted to be an accountant, that was shocking. And before I graduated, she convinced me, if you look at my yearbook, I was going to go to DeVry and do some technician something or other, because she almost convinced me that my goal was a little bit bigger than my capacity and my capability. Luckily, I have a couple of older brothers that knocked me back in line, and I went to William Patterson when everybody was studying psychology, sociology, philosophy, and basket weaving. Here's this one kid in the class that wants to be an accountant. And I graduated. And I'm working in that profession. And the interesting thing is, although I'm an accountant, English and writing are the skills that I use most. Because once you've done the analysis and the math, you have to translate that as an auditor to management and to others. And you have to write it in a way that people can understand what you're talking about. So children need to know that all learning is valued, and don't say, I won't ever need to use this, or I don't need this skill because I'm going to be this and not that. You never know where life is going to take you, and all learning adds value. And so we need to be as sponges, acquire as much education as we can, and as much learning as we can to make sure that our path forward is a bright one.
Great. I'm a pretty good basket weaver, Bill. Don't discount. The elephant in the room. We know that though it may not be the total or the largest obstacle, we know that our school funding and the underfunding is definitely impacting the level of education, not only in Patterson, but other urban centers and schools around the state of New Jersey. In your opinion, how is underfunding really impacting the level of education, our ability to deliver that quality education? And also, what direction do you think we need to move in to find a solution to this underfunding debacle we're in?
I'm we're the closest to this issue, being school board members. Let me say this. If you, preschool is essential because it teaches urban children vocabulary and begins them on the road to reading. On the road to reading. On average, urban students have a vocabulary that's 1,000 words fewer than their suburban counterparts. And the size of your vocabulary is very important to your being able to decode words when you see them, and hence being able to read. So if our parents aren't reading to our students, to their children, at an early age, aren't practicing their sounds and things, then they come to school with a handicap. Now, to address that, we have to supply services. We have to create reading programs, reading specialists. We had to put in school libraries in every school. I mean, Patterson used to have 8 libraries when I came here. 8, when I arrived in 1987. And I remember the city council meeting when they voted to cut 4. And I caught it. But now it's 4, and now it's down to 3. It's 3. But you had 8. So your schools, in response, created libraries because reading is such a problem. Well, our funding cuts meant we have to cut the librarians. So in a district where our children have a significant challenge in language arts and math, we're cutting librarians and essentially shutting down libraries. I have a test, a brand new test that people are concerned about, PARC testing, which gives a greater indication of where you are in terms of the new curriculum, the new advanced curriculum, which is the Common Core. We have to write curriculum that will enable our students to experience more rigorous curriculum, more rigorous challenges, and a greater depth of understanding, and the key word is mastery of the material going forward. That's what the Common Core wants you to do. It wants you to master more material, less material, but to a greater degree. That's the essence. So that you can actually be able to create solutions, it must master the material. But that requires people to write the curriculum. It requires, once the curriculum is written, time for your teachers to come out of their classrooms so that they can be trained on what the new curriculum is. Then it requires subs in order to go to those classrooms to release time for those teachers. But if you don't have the money, you can't pay for the subs. And if you don't have the money, you can't pay for the time to get those teachers out of the classroom to learn. You can't even pay for the people to write the curriculum. And the people who do the training are the administrators, but we have to lay off 83 of them. So that suggests that you're going to have a grave difficulty in being able to respond to the new testing that's in existence, and more importantly, being able to even develop the curriculum that's needed to get us closer to where we need to be. And by the way, we're not starting off neck and neck with everybody else. We're already behind them. We were trying to catch up. So our ability to catch up to what everybody else is doing is has been significantly undermined by this loss in financial revenue. Plus, there's the other aspect of the social needs of our students. You know, we're living in an economically challenged environment with crime, drugs, shootings, and people whose attitudes are not pro-education. And our children walk through these problems on a daily basis, and they get influenced heavily. So we have put together a support network behind them to help work them through all of these issues in the schools, which perhaps some of their parents aren't able to do or fail to do because they're involved themselves. Well, we used to have 24 substance abuse counselors that helped and were very instrumental in taking care of kids who talk about suicide and drug use and so forth. We're down to, was it 11? 11 out of 24. And even 24. Yes. Absolutely. So even the 24 was inadequate, so we have 54 schools. So you begin to see that we're beginning to remove the safety net. We live in an asthma corridor. What that means is that you have a high incidence of asthma in this city. And this city, New York City, this whole area, this immediate region is a high incidence of asthma. Well, you have to have nurses ready and prepared in those schools in case a child has an asthma attack. That's life-threatening. You don't have 20 minutes to wait. Because a child can die in 8 short minutes. Actually less than that, 6. 6 to 8 minutes, you can lose your life from an asthma attack, which can become irreversible. You don't have time to play around. Well, we don't have nurses in all the schools anymore. We can't afford that. So we have some nurses go to 2 or 3, cover 2 or 3 schools. Imagine that. So if your child is having an asthma attack in this school, and you're way over here someplace else, who gets to them? Who takes care of that child? Or a peanut allergy that they're unaware of. I mean, yes, there are people there who can fill in, but it's not the nurse. It isn't the person that's appropriate. So these are just some of the challenges that are presented. And to his benefit, or to his credit, the superintendent was very, very blunt. And he said that we will not, given this $45 million shortfall in experience, he will not be able to provide the services that he provided last year. And last year was inadequate. So we're going to have to muddle along and try to do what we can, given the very grave impact. I mean, I just can't underscore how serious this is. In 2 years, our audit suggested we'll be facing a $186 million shortfall in our budget. That means we will need $186 million just to break even. Every year that we are flat funded, which means that the government is flat funded, means we receive the same amount of money we did the previous year, we are 6 to 7% below what we actually need. Because flat funding is not flat. Our expenses raised or increased 6 to 7% every year.
How many years have we been flat?
7 years. So we're already owed $242 million. And so people say, well, why don't they cut the budget? We have been cutting the budget every year, 8 to 7%. We've had to. But you can't continue to do that and seek to have the kind of educational progress that's needed just to catch up. to a thorough and efficient education. So what we're all going to have to do is more at home, more in the classroom, more as students to participate and to work to get the education that we need. Because you know what? Irrespective of what the state of New Jersey is prepared to give you, you need it. You have to be educated. And you can't let the inadequacies of this system shortchange you, because once they do, they shortchange you for the rest of your life. And that's what people here have to understand. We have to push back by all means, but in this city, as a community, as a family of Pattersonians, we have got to circle the wagons and make sure our children learn to the best that they can under the circumstances.
Anyone else want to add to that? How is that underfunding impacting the quality of education?
Well, let me just echo all of what Dr. Hodges said, and I think for all the listeners and for the people in the audience, the parents, Dr. Hodges really made it very clear in terms of what the impact is. I think what I'd like to just add to what he just shared is that let's look at what happened. We've given a couple of different examples. Council President McCoy talked about the importance of technology and the cell phone and what it's able to do. Dr. Hodges spoke about exploring the unimaginable and how do we get there and what we need in order to get there. And what happens when you don't have that? Let's now look in terms of what we as individuals, what responsibility, what civic responsibility, along with all of the other responsibilities that we have as a community person, as a resident, as a parent, as a participating, civic-minded individual. Let me just say that a lot of what has been talked about here is something that we, in more ways than one, have an ability to control. But how do we do that? We do that in one way, in many ways, but one way that you all have the ability to do, elections have consequences. To ladies and gentlemen, it is so important to make sure that the individuals that you elect into office are individuals that really have the ability to have your children as their first priority. And why? Because that's your priority. That they are your first priority. You need to make sure that your first priority is their priority, and all of us. And why do I talk about that? Why am I not why am I not continuing perhaps on the very same end that Dr. Hodges said? Let me tell you why. Who takes control of making sure that the budgets that we just talked about are indeed made available and provided to each and every one of the communities throughout the state of New Jersey? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that budget is put in every year through the executive branch of the state of New Jersey, who, by the way, is Governor Christie right now. Right now. Elections have consequences. Who we elect will make a difference. Members of the legislative body who we elect have to be mindful that they are fighting for the same causes that you want them to be fighting, that we're fighting for the causes that you believe in. That's what your civic obligation and civic-minded duties should be, right? Because you're fighting for the future of your children. Council President McCoy talked about his mom and dad and how they were like the smartest people. I was not nodding my head because I don't know how my parents did it, but my parents I thought they were just so smart. My mom was the one, this incredible woman that had so much wisdom. She might not have learned it all by a formal instructional sitting down in the classroom to the highest level as many of us would want to make sure that we have our children achieve today. My dad, however, but my mom was able to do that and do it well and raise not only her family, but an army of families that really was welcome into our homes. So my dad, who was, I mentioned he was a very crafty carpenter. Well, let me just say, no one can add better than my father. Somehow he certainly knew how to handle a budget, how to handle and make sure to do the necessary and appropriate measurements to make sure that he was able to accomplish and achieve his goal and whatever project he was doing. But that's bringing back some of the basics. How do we get that to today? Smart boards. We talked about how many of those smart boards today are needed in our classrooms. How are we doing that in terms of, oh, I see that my colleague, Assemblyman Wimberly has just joined us. Assemblyman, I did share what our dilemma was today. I also mentioned how we were in Trenton and how you were making every possible attempt to get here. And so I'm so happy that you were able to. But we're talking about the impact of what happens when schools become underfunded and Dr. Hodges spoke extremely eloquently in terms of the impact of what's happening locally in our schools. I am now speaking about what happens with elections have consequences. It's who is making the decision at the top. And we all know that that has an effect going, what do you call it? A trickle-down effect, pardon me, thank you very much. It has a trickle-down effect of what happens when we don't have the right people making those decisions. I can tell you, and one of the things that we talked about are what impacts the child. We talked about the importance of early childhood education and the importance of having that. One of the things that was removed from the budgets for the last couple of years that we've been fighting for is that wraparound program and the importance of the wraparound program and the importance for parents, because you want to be able to have your child be in an early childhood education environment. So not only for your child to be able to learn, but for you to be able to also know that your child is in a safe place, that you can get to your place of work and know when you come back from work that you're able to pick up your child from the very location that you dropped them off and that they're going to be safe there. But they're also going to learn in the incredible educational abilities that they get to be able to have that competitiveness that we talked about before, to be able to be prepared for that next level so that we can have them compete on that global level, so that we can become the owners and providers of those companies, so that we can hire our children coming up and looking for that next job. We want to see the next inventor coming from our very own households. We want to be able to make sure that they are given every single opportunity that our neighbors right next door from our great city of Patterson have the opportunity to do, but our children are being denied that opportunity. That's what we're fighting for, and that's what my colleagues and I fully understand, that that's what you want us to do. We know what you want, we know what you're looking for. We continue to fight in Trenton each and every day, but remember, ladies and gentlemen, when things come for you to take a look at, your participation is just as important in order to make it happen, because together we have an ability to make a lot of things happen. Thank you very much.
Let's continue the conversation.
Sure, excellent. I think it's a great question, a great conversation. And I'm going to pick up where Senator Cole left off, because she did what I was thinking that I would do, which is bridge the two pieces of the conversation. Not only you need the technical resources, the teachers in the classroom, the student material, the Olympic swimming pool, and the roofs that are not leaking, and the water that is healthy and not contain lead. All of those things, and the environment in which our children, Dr. Hodges spoke about, just walk in the street, but lead in the lead paint. And you see what's happening now in Michigan, and it's symptomatic of the urban centers, where there's a benign neglect. Folks just doesn't think that it's important, or that your child is important enough to get the full attention. And if those things were happening someplace else, it would have been, 50 and 60 alarms going off, and it would have been fixed and corrected. But too often our children are seen as less than. Senator Poe talked about the early childhood program, which I'm a part of, and what is called wraparound. But that was DHS program that handled DOE did the education portion, DHS did the early school and after school. And she said, elections have consequences, and sometimes we don't fully understand that. We had a governor prior to this governor who valued the urban centers and valued the education of children, and established two sides to the coin called preschool. The DOE funds the first 6 hours, DHS funds the other 4 hours for a 10-hour day for children in urban centers to get an education. And what it means is not only the educational instruction, but the before school and after school care to make sure that those children are in a safe environment, not with Uncle Joe and Big Brother and in a place that they're not secure and safe and comfortable, and continue to receive the instruction, because we start out behind. We start out in a deficit, so we need more to move forward. This governor made a definitional change, a language change in the eligibility of who would participate in the after-school program. And all of a sudden, it goes from 100% qualified. If you're in the urban center and you are getting the educational instruction, all of those kids would automatically qualify for the wraparound program. By changing that language definition, now all of a sudden, 15, maybe 20% of the children qualify. So, the example is, how many tires, how many wheels does a car need to run effectively? It needs 4, right? 4 on the wheel and probably 5, 1 in the spare. If you take one of those wheels off, how effective is that vehicle? Not very effective. So when they took away the funding for DHS, it weakens the entire program. So now you have daycare centers and providers trying to provide the same level of service with 30% less of the income. Makes it very, very impossible, and now they're cheating from other areas to supplement that funding. So the children are no longer getting the full benefit of the educational program that was designed specifically to help them to catch up. And that's where we are as parents. We have to, and Dr. Hodges says it often, we have to supplement that in every way we can. Fight for the full funding, which is our right, but also support that at home, sitting down with the children and reading to them, and when they get to an age, have them read to you. Now, I told you my dad was smart, right? He had a 3rd grade education, and I didn't know that my dad couldn't read well. Every evening when I come from school, he would hand me the newspaper and have me read from the front cover all the way through. And I go, why is this guy, annoying me every day to read the paper? Why don't he read it for himself? But I became a very good reader because I went through that exercise, okay? He had a small business. I would go out and write the receipts and do all of this stuff. So you understand from an early age business. And here's the other thing that I want to interject. Also, as parents, we have to make sure that education our children receive is not just what I was focused on primarily, which is go to school and get a job. We have to begin to teach our children from an early age how to create a job for themselves, the value of money, so that when I have $1, I'm not buying $150 sneakers, but I know I have a savings account. I know I'm saving for something in the future. I know I'm putting this into an investment. I have a bank account. I was a very entrepreneurial child when I was growing up. I saw a need, and I went after it. Talk about being a carpenter. I thought I would have, when I was a kid, I would be a carpenter, a roofer, or build houses. I would build a cart, build this, paint it, you know, and sell it. Trade this and that, and make a little bit of money. Children must be taught the value of money and commerce and business, even from a lemonade stand, you know, selling a watermelon. Introduce them to the concept that we're not just consumers, but we are business folks. We can create. So, you know, I never had an allowance when I was a child. There was no such thing. But I do believe in the program of an allowance for chores that have been done. So kids have their own money and their own concept of money. We have kids going through high school that can't write a check. There's no how to process a check. We have adults in this community. Now, figure this. If your parents don't own a checkbook and pay everything in cash, from rent to anything else, it's less likely that you're going to know how to manage a checkbook, which is not entirely difficult, but it changes your mind and your concept as to how the world operates and how commerce operates. So today, we talk about the telephone. Guess what? That's my bank. I can go to my phone now and type on an app and tell you what account, what check has cleared my bank and how much money I have in the bank. And in a minute, I can put my phone up to the register and pay for my coffee and donut and keep on chucking without ever going to my wallet. The millennium, the new kids on the block, they don't walk with money. I have a young lady that works for me. She has no money in her pocket. And while I like paper and binders and I want a copy of everything, she tells me, oh, it's in the computer. Now in my thinking, I can't see it, so it doesn't exist. In her generation, she don't need to see it. I can access it as I need it. It's in the cloud. Think about that concept. Where'd that come from? Okay? Somebody sitting back. Here's the very truth. When I first started at New Jersey Bell, they had a research department called Bell Corps that they did all of the research and creation. And one of the guys told me, he's from Trinidad, that McCoy, in a few years, you're going to be able to go to work in your pajamas, sitting in your living room. I laughed at it, but he saw the concept of computers. He knew the transmission going back and forth, and he knew that he controls stuff just from the computer, and that ultimately, one day you'll be working at home, which we do now. Telecommuting. You do everything from home, nobody knows that you're not there.
He's a rich man now, right?
Right, and he also told me, McCoy, when you're at Belcor, here everybody wants to see you working, right? That was the old job, you created widget. So if you're not moving, if you're not hammering, you're not doing any work. He said, when you go to Belcor, you'll see a guy sit back with his foot on the windowsill, staring out the window. And you say, get back to work. And he says, he's working. They pay him to think. They pay him to create. Who thought of a laser, a light beam going from here to there? That's somebody sitting in a room, looking out the window, looking at the cloud, and say, wow, I can see the same cloud from downtown Patterson as I can from Montclair. So why should I have my data on the computer that I have to go into work to get to my data? Why not put the data in the cloud? And so now you have the iCloud. I still don't trust it because I'm old school. I'm not putting my stuff in the cloud yet. But the people of today have no data being stationary. Their data is portable. My data is wherever I'm at. I can pull that down, I can access it, whether I'm at work, whether I'm at play, whether I'm on vacation, whether I'm in Jamaica on the beach, doesn't matter. I can access my information. And that's the kind of thinking that makes a quality education. And you don't get that if all you're instructing your children in, or in schools, is directed on, reading and writing and not doing those conceptual work, or thinking that it's a waste to put an Olympic swimming pool in Patterson. No, it's not. Or it's too expensive. When I was on the Board of Education, Dr. DeRoy had a great plan, but it was flawed. Because we couldn't get the new schools, they were expanding on existing schools. I would build a couple of rooms onto an existing school. That's where School 26 and School 1 came into being, just add-on. School 13 got an add-on. And when they rolled out the plan, Chief Moody was there, they were not putting in air conditioning in the new addition. They did not account for additional bathrooms or a staff lounge, or none of that. And I made this very profound statement, Dr. Hodges, to Dr. DeRoy, that a school is not just a compilation of classrooms, but it takes ancillary support to get to a school. You need a teacher's lounge. You need bathroom facilities. And every addition in our center now, because our kids have to go to school almost year-round, has to have air conditioning so that the building is effective and usable in the summer. And everybody go, wow, that makes sense. And now we see that happen. International High School, great facility, but we needed 12 of these by now. And we need to insist that all our children are important, because you never know where the next invention is going to come from. You never know where the next cure for this particular disease is going to come from. And I've said it before, and it may be boasting, but I think it's important that we give our young people examples. We had a kid from John F. Kennedy High School who needed free and reduced lunch in order to get through high school. And when he was working, created the E-rate program by design, which is a federal program across the entire United States, $3.25 billion. And that kid came right out of Kennedy. That kid is the kid that's talking to you. And I've never been a programmer, never been a designer, but I was an accountant, had a keen mind, I did methods and procedures, and I was on the board at the time. And we were able to create that program with a host of programmers, and that program is running today. So every child is important. You never know where that child is going to go. You never know what opportunities are going to be before them. So it behooves us as a community and as a society to make sure every child is well educated.
So we're gonna let
Senator Wimberly,
he's already cut off the Assemblyman. Before you came, he told me that the Assemblyman is not here, the Senator is not here. You two guys will have all the time you need. I won't have to give you to a 3-minute, but then you showed up, okay?
Bill,
welcome.
Bill just got off a campaign. He's still wrapped up, so we thank you. And it's true. I said, hey.
He won the election. Nobody told him yet, I don't think. Great job.
Calm down, Bill, right? So Assembly Wimberly, you can kind of catch up here, And again, underfunding is impacting our schools. We'd like you to share what you feel the impact is, but also, if you can, share with us your notions around what parents can do, and even our business sector, to try to get us over the hump where we can get over the hump of this underfunding debacle.
I mean, coming in and on the tail end of the conversation, first I apologize. We had a voting session today. That wasn't on our schedule as of last week. So we're coming in, and one of the things that I've been fighting for with the school district is obviously the full funding and the formula. And today I had an opportunity to sit with one of my colleagues from Burlington County, Assemblyman Troy Singleton. And they came up with numbers on how to get additional money. And last year, we did a budget resolution, myself and Senator Poe, Assemblywoman Sumter, for $19 million for Patterson and Egg Harbor Township, which it was a formula based on property tax value and public school needs, and it was vetoed by our governor. This year, we're looking at something, and I'm going to be talking to Singleton and Warner, which covers more of the state. So we're hoping that since more of the state is involved, because the full funding issue is not just a Patterson issue. We had budget hearings throughout the state of New Jersey, and we heard from Freehold, Red Bank, I know Dr. Hodges was at a couple of them, across the board, and the issues of funding are not just, it's not just an urban issue. It's an issue that covers the board. Freehold to me was unique because of the undocumented residents there, that it has really increased the number of people in the schools, and as undocumented, they had still provided education to them. In the state of New Jersey, the DOE is not acknowledging that. They have to give Freehold and Red Bank the funding for it. So the funding part is that it's a continual fight. I don't have a lot of faith in our current governor, Chris Christie, that he even cares about what our kids get. And I hear the argument about the issue here with the buildings and stuff like that. The reality is, after 5 years on the assembly, it's almost a situation where I think they have blinders on. And I think the reality of education and looking at the poor and working class has been really brought to light by Donald Trump. I think the reality is that they look at two different classes of society. Now, we proposed a millionaire's tax. And I hate to say, if I'm a millionaire, I want to give more to my community. I want to give back in taxes more. You see, now the presumptive, is that the new term that they're using for him? Trump won't even divulge his taxes. So you look at the situation of how people think. And as I'm sitting there sometimes, and I look across the aisle, I go to myself sometimes when we're arguing back and forth in these education or budget committees, they have no clue what it is to live like some of our kids and families live. Now, I'm a lifelong Patterson resident, you know, a product of Alabama projects to 17th Ave. So I was the Jeffersons moving backwards. So I went from public housing to the 5th Ward. And I grew up as the youngest of 6. And we were a poor family. A single mom for most of my life, working class. I didn't even know how to do financial aid forms when it was time to go to college. My mother was helped by my guidance counselor, thank God, to get me through college and all that stuff. And now, as a parent of 4 boys who've all been part of Patterson Public Schools, I get an everyday reality check on why we have to fight for our kids in funding. On top of being an educator, a coach, and being in recreation, and sometimes people just don't understand how it is. Now, the reality is, being a homeroom teacher at Eastside High School was probably like a doctorate degree. I was a homeroom teacher, and the kids would come to school, and they would have a honey bun and a quarter water. Now, how do you operate on a honey bun and a quarter water? And I would be like, you can't come in here with this. Your minds are fried and burnt before you even started. And I'm a 23-year-old as my first year as a teacher. And I'm talking to them like, you know, Benji from 17th Ave. Like, no, you can't come in here. And they would tell me some of these stories about, you know, their lives and what they were going through. And I go, wow, people just don't know what our kids go through. So you take for granted that somebody's on boil water and give you this oatmeal. Because that was our basic. We were a Farina oatmeal family. I didn't know what bacon and eggs was in the morning. We ate, that Farina thing, I don't eat Farina now because we ate so much. But no, we didn't get the bacon and you got bacon on Saturday and Sunday bacon. You know, so the reality is that people don't understand the challenges that our kids face when it comes to health care. And I heard Senator Poe talk about, you know, women's health care, slashed for the last 7 years. And if we don't start off at that level of making sure that our women get the proper care when they're having children, even before they're having children, we're defeated from that point. Yeah. Because now, you know, add on lead and these old buildings and these old houses and all this stuff, before this kid is born, he's already behind academically. Yeah. You know, he has a challenge. So, I mean, that's the fight. And I gotta be, the reality is, as a father, you really go in there, and I always call our family the plus one, and Kemper can relate to this, that we always got one more kid with us that's not our kid. And it's a new kid, it seemed like every other week, that we got somebody new in the house. And I hear, and my kids have been around, and they're like, well, can they come with us? Yeah, come on, just come on one more. And you start picking up the family stories that when I drop them off, the mother tells me what's going on, what's going this. So the reality is if you are afraid to touch the hands of our community and our kids, we will never get any better. And the fight is that we have to get into the whole process, because anytime you have a 15.3% voter turnout, we will continue to be irrelevant to Chris Christie. Not only will we be irrelevant to Chris Christie with a 15% voter turnout, we'll be irrelevant to the next Democratic governor if we don't turn people out. So don't think that just because it's going to be a Democratic governor, and I've wised up enough to know that if you don't have numbers, if you don't bring people out, you do not have power. And that means getting funding for our school districts, getting new buildings put up. And I watch cities that are smaller than us, that have less than us, and they get more than us. And I watched keenly on how the game is being played, and the senator's been there a lot longer than me. If you do not have the ability to motivate and mobilize people to get out and vote for whatever election it is, people will smile in your face, shake your hand, and we're working on that project. We're getting back to you. So we're getting smarter as a legislative team, and we're learning, but we need your help to make sure that that kid doesn't have to come to school and eat a honey bun, doesn't have to have a butter roll and a CNC in the morning. I mean, that's the fight. That's the real fight. That we start from the early childhood to, prenatal care, make sure our children get what they deserve. And down the line, like I said, I think the reality is it's a holistic approach to making sure that it's a health issue, that it's a mental health issue, that there's education, and it's a whole combined way to really raise and make this educational system better.
Thank you, Senator. Let's give our elected officials a round of applause for coming out this evening. It takes a caring electorate to, and I know how it is to be down in Trenton and trying to, get out of the room. People are pulling at you, but we really appreciate you guys coming out and saying, hey, I got to get back to that. I'll talk to you later, all right? So at this point, we're going to take a few questions from our audience, okay? And we're going to basically, I think we have a mic going around, and if you would raise a hand, okay, you're back in school, and I ask that you keep your questions, reasonable, and your statements even more reasonable, and then we're going to ask our electors to answer your questions as best they can, all right? So we have let's give our volunteers a round of applause from our STEM Academy.
Good evening. Assemblyman Wimberly, I'm glad that you mentioned something about the lead in the water. And what concerns me is that the already underfunding or illegal underfunding of the state is going to further impede our ability to address that issue. But given the amount of money that we have now, is there any way that we can be able to address it in any of the schools?
Well, I believe the governor is going to approve $10 million for the lead, testing and going throughout the buildings and listening and what's going on through the budget process. Obviously, the local municipality is also going to have to kick in the local school districts, because $10 million, it's not an urban issue.
Right.
And Saddlebrook, a couple other places, if you see, it's just an old building. So I think, I believe it's $10 million that the governor is going to sign into for the lead. So it is $10 million that Commissioner that is going to be put towards it.
Thank you so very much. First, let me just real quickly add to that. During the most recent budget hearing in the Senate, one of the things, and I made it a point of asking every single commissioner who serves as a member of the governor's cabinet level to this question, and it was on the lead paint, the lead levels. in terms of our drinking water and the impact that it has, not only in Patterson, and I use the Flint, Michigan situation as an example, not only in Patterson, but in Newark and many of those other towns that we don't know. And here's what's so striking. I raised the question at the very beginning to our state treasurer. Hey, by the way, keep that in mind because I'm going to circle back to the state treasurer before my comment is over. To our Commissioner of Department of Education, because he's responsible for the schools. To our Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection. He's responsible for making sure the protection of our environment. To our Executive Director of the School Construction Corporation, School Development Corporation, which is his responsibility, particularly for Patterson and that of Newark, in terms of any new schools, existing schools, for the maintenance of our schools, particularly at this problem. I've made it a point of raising the question to the Commissioner of the Department of Health. Why? Because it's her responsibility also to make sure that they are carefully monitoring that. And finally, I made the question and raised the same question to the Commissioner of the Department of Human Services. All different commissioners, all different days, all different hearings. Interesting enough, they all circle around the issue, no definitive answer, all acknowledge the importance and how well aware they are of the situation, express concerns, but no definitive answer or solution. They all, by the way, did this, pointed to one another, who would be responsible. And finally, the last commissioner said, well, you know, it really rests on the treasurer. So remember, I started with the treasurer. But the treasurer, and the assemblyman knows this all too well because he serves on the Assembly Budget Committee, I serve on the Senate Budget Committee. The last person that comes back to us is indeed the treasurer to give us an update of the state's budget forecasts and revenues. So I made it a point of remembering to ask him the question and clearly pointed out to him, you know, I've spoken and I said everything that I've just laid out, I said it to him. I said, I've spoken and brought this up to every single one of the cabinet members of the governor, you know, in the administration. They all indicated to me that you would be the one to make sure to provide us with the information and the answer, because the resources of the funding of any and all of those particular actions that were going to be given sat in the hands of the treasurer, who clearly works very closely with the governor. Long and behold, I got the same answer. We're looking into it. We are going to do everything possible to make sure that we try to find a way to address that. So, quite honestly, I just want you to know that while we do see that there is some additional funding that the governor put in his first proposed budget, we wanted to make sure of two things. One, that money remains in the final budget, because now what the governor is saying to us is that the state has a budgetary gap as a result of the reduced amount of revenues brought in from the corporate business tax, and how that has caused a significant gap in terms of being able to meet their budgetary needs. And as a result of that, there's going to be some significant reduction, some of which, a good amount of that, would be an additional $25 million for our hospitals in terms of charity care. Who's our first point of contact when we need our children to be addressed into either for the examination or follow-up or exam, you know, whatever it may be in terms of their health? levels also included is our hospitals. So Assemblyman Wimberly and I have a responsibility of making sure that we stay on top of it, and I can assure you this is something that we will continue to do. But it doesn't stop there. The advocacy and the need for us to continue to speak out and make them accountable is a responsibility of all of us. And I can tell you that that's something that we have vocally and publicly have spoken out to, and making sure that that be addressed.
Next question.
Let me thank everybody for being here. I believe traditional public school is under severe pressure, and I just need to get your opinion on what we can do, because we must do something, and if we don't, then I don't know what is going to happen to our public schools. Now, I was at a meeting at PCTI, Passaic County Technical Institute. When was it? Monday, yeah. And there's a proposal on the table to expand that school by another 1,000 seating capacity. The present enrollment there is 3,300 students. 3,300 students. 1,600 plus out of that 3,300 student comes from Patterson. We currently spending something like $20 million per year to send our kids up there. We also have a situation where we have a serious expansion of charter schools in our city. We presently spending $34 million per year for charters. Now, if you have that expansion at PCTI, we can compete with 55 acres of manicure lawn and beautiful buildings. So of course our kids will want to go up the hill. And I would want my kid to go up the hill too. But look at the cost. What is costing us here? Can we afford, if 50% of the population up there comes from Patterson, you're expanding it to another 1,000. Don't you think half of that is going to come from Patterson? Another 500, 600 is going to come from Patterson. And what do you think it's going to do to our budget? We just got slapped with a $45 million cut in our budget. We had to lay off 105 staff members. So with all of that coming, how do you think we'll be able to sustain what we are doing now without totally destroying what we have?
I'm going to start off very quick because the governor, well, I'm close to the issue. The governor just this day released new guidelines for charter schools. And I haven't had a chance to see them fully, but the press called me this afternoon. They wanted me to scream and yell, and I didn't disappoint them. Apparently, there are less requirements for certification of teachers and business administrators. They're requiring the school district to, if we are aware or in possession of buildings that are available for leasing, we are required to notify the state so that those buildings be used by charter schools, and there's more stuff there I don't want to speak too unintelligently, because I'm going to start screaming again. But the governor has said that the takeover districts in particular are abject failures. They're of course under his supervision, which means that we've been under control, state control for 25 years come August 1st, or whatever it is. We're abject failures. And it seems that what's happening here is they're creating a fiscal environment where that comes true. Because when the money is being drawn away from the vast majority, and I don't begrudge parents seeking out the best education opportunity for their children. My parents did that. We did it illegally, but we did it. So I don't begrudge parents doing that. But I understand that. But the vast majority of children are being cheated out of an education, deprived of education because of the political mindset that they want the private entities to be involved in the educational process. And that means that they can divvy up part of the $3 trillion that's involved in education in this country. And what the tech example that you pointed out, Commissioner Carr, is just a model of what's going to happen. Tech will tell you, well, you can't provide those services here in Patterson. And they're absolutely right. And one of the reasons we can't provide those services is because we can't pick and choose what kid comes to our schools. We can't screen out kids and say, well, you're not quite good enough. We have to take whoever comes to that door. Because if we could take just the top 1%, we'd have a gifted and talented program. And we could tailor a program, a gifted and talented program for those kids. We've already done that. And it's top notch. Those kids, 100 of those kids achieved 100% passage of the HSPT. 100%. So we can do those things because we can operate with the same constraints or requirements that they do in tech. But the way they operate is going to provide a financial hardship in short order for the entire school district here, and it'll cost us more teachers. It'll cost us more buildings next, because that seems to be the focus. Is to make us consolidate and leave up our buildings, and guess who will be there to snap up those buildings? We're already giving a charter school a reduced rate, a windfall on our next lease. We're paying $400,000. They're getting the same space for $183,000. That's your money. That's your children's money. And that's the push of the state. It's working to the detriment of the vast majority of our children. I don't know who to give this to next.
We've run out of time.
Yes, seriously.
So,
all I would say is, though, briefly,
This study would happen in Philadelphia, in Chicago,
yes,
and Detroit. So I mean, those things, it becomes a big money business. I mean, people are not going to charter school just out of the goodness of their hearts. They're making money off of it. And as far as Passaic County Tech, Commissioner Carr, I think it makes the competition field unlevel. Like you said, a kid walks on that campus, why not go there? I'm a tech graduate, and when I was a kid then, and it was there, parents wanted their kids to go somewhere that they considered a safe environment, brand new technology, things of that nature. So, two pools.
So I think we're going to take one more question, and I think two more, because our guests are about three of our guests have engagements. So we're going to take a question over here. Someone can grab my mic.
I might be able to. I may not need it. Can I
Okay. Educator's voice.
Yeah. I'm going to put on my teacher voice. I'm going to shift gears a little bit from the education topic and ask the Senator and Assemblyman Wimberly something specific about the election. Because like the Senator said, elections have consequences. So in my research My question is, do you guys know when or if the specific questions, when they will come out with regard to what will be on the ballot, like what the ballot questions will be, if there will be any for New Jersey for the election in November?
I mean, it's gonna be quite a few, and we don't know exactly yet. I think that's what it's gonna be.
Right, I think it's a little early. It depends on what happens just before we adopt our budget, because a lot of some of the legislative action may require that whatever doesn't get covered in the budget process may require that it have special legislative action through a referendum, which will then be placed on the ballot. So if that's what you're referring to regarding, this year's budget and what is going to take place, I think that's what can be anticipated. Exactly what that language is, I can assure you that we have yet to see that information. That has yet not been made available.
And as a teacher, if the pension is one of your questions, I think that's gonna be, I sponsored it in the assembly about the quarterly pension payments. And obviously, I'm part of the pension system, so it's an issue for me. I think that's gonna be a major issue along with the minimum wage.
Right.
I mean, we have so many issues that.
And a lot of that is, and a lot of that is still working. I know that just today, for example, my understanding is that was hotly debated and discussed at the assembly level. In the Senate, we're still waiting for that piece of legislation has not moved. I know that that's happening right now on the discussion level in the assembly. So as that's happening, and it's going to happen in both houses because otherwise it doesn't get through, you're going to hear more and more about it. That's why the specific language has yet to be made, or that it's yet to be made, to be available.
And the casino issue, obviously, you'll read about it in the paper tomorrow, some of the agreements we made, but that's going to be a hot issue also.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Quick question. I want to know why Board of Education or the Assembly or the Senate have not put in a personal suit against the governor for violating the Supreme Court order and underfunding the education.
I can say very quickly that,
And just, excuse me, Dr. Howard, before you continue, Brother Moody, I was reading about this. Is it true that you need 5,000 signatures to actually get the governor to apply for a lawsuit against the governor?
no,
No?
that's not true. Anybody can sue anybody, any court. Yes. No, I will simply say this, Reverend Gibbons, he announced that he plans to sue the state for money on behalf of Patterson. You need a injured party, meaning a family member or a student, to be the victim or that you're suing on behalf. And I imagine they're engaged in that process right now. I'll simply say they probably won't be alone when that happens. And so those things are already being discussed. I'm not saying anything out of tail. I'm being very careful. He's already announced that. There's one press release. They plan to move forward with that. But it requires funding. It requires funding. It requires funding. They need legal assistance. They need people to do other work. So it doesn't mean they're doing it. It has to be we're involved, us as a community, be engaged in this in order to make this happen. One more time. It requires funding. In case you didn't hear me the first 3 times. All right, that's that's right. Yes, so things have to happen in order to but that's not going to be an immediate fix. That's going to take some time.
It has been.
Yes.
Educational seminary.
So, you convinced me for one final question, $25 after we finish. All right?
We were reminded on tonight, I submitted a poll that we have a civic responsibility, which means that we need to be careful about who we go out and vote for. In the recent elections for council, 4 of the Board of Education members were running for that office. I wondered how committed they are to their current role. My question is, how do we as parents, as a community, prevent something like that from happening where it seems that people are using that office as a stepping stone to something greater when they yet have not sat long enough to prove themselves as they have spoken and committed in saying that they are in fact for our children. So it seems like there's a problem there, and that is a concern, and I think that all the parents should have that concern as well. If you're allowed to take that position and use it as a platform in order to get to another platform when you really had no intention of representing our children as they need to be, I think that there needs to be a conversation at some point about that.
Yes, we should have that conversation later. And the broader context of that is voter participation. And each of us have that obligation. And if we didn't go out to vote, doesn't matter how many people are there or how many people are not, if we didn't show up at the polls as a parent, we have not fulfilled our duty and we betray our children. I give you one example. I'm one of those folks that were in the last election. And in one district, there's 13,000 registered voters in my ward. So a district, and there are 13 districts, so a district may constitute close to 1,000 people. In this one area, it may be a little bit less than that. But there were, I think, 20 or 22 votes cast in the entire district. Now you say, and in that district, I got the least number of votes. I got 4. Now you ask yourself the question, if this was the state of New Jersey and I was the governor, how much time would you focus on that district? Where out of all your votes, you only got 4 votes. And that's the thing that we don't seem to understand. We are being disadvantaged, abused and misused to the point that we don't think our voice, our vote matters. And it does matter. In funding, in the census, in the allocation of resources, in the representation that we have, it does matter. So we need to go on a strong voter education, which we've been on, to show that you have to show up and vote. It may not appear that you're making that tremendous impact, but folks look at those numbers and resources are often allocated based on those people that show up. And the Assemblyman told you about that example. All right, so I don't know if we have time for a follow-up.
And the other issue is when you have people to step forward and run for these offices. I've been in Patterson, and I think everybody up here, well, we had uncontested elections, or we only have 5 people running for 4 seats. So if anything, we have to hone in the skills of our most talented people who want to be leaders, regardless of what the election is, because it's a democracy. That's the great thing about America. If Donald Trump could run for president, then anybody can run for any office anywhere. Really think about that. So sometimes we have to seek out people for offices when, people won't step up to the plate. So we can't knock anybody for stepping in, because the hardest thing I would tell anybody is putting your name on that petition and running for office. That's the hardest thing. And I give everybody, I don't have to like you, I don't have to support you, but once you step into that arena, you've really opened yourself up to a whole different you're in a fishbowl. So we really need to hone, and hopefully we can keep our most talented people here in Patterson, and we don't lose them to Atlanta and Charlotte and everywhere else, that they come back and they do eventually become, school board members or council members if that's what they seek in, political careers. But I commend everybody who's on the school board because they are a volunteer, basically, board. There is no salary involved. There are lengthy meetings involved in it. So, I mean, Dr. Hodges, you've been around for a while. I mean, he should get a crown. I mean, it should be to the point that parents should be fighting to get on the school board. You go to other communities, people don't even have kids in the school board like Teaneck or Lakewood. Once we get local control back, you will probably have 20 people running for school board. But the guys who are there now, we got to commend them, and I don't expect you to be there for 20 years. Well, we do expect you to be there for 20 years. But everybody else, I think there should be more parents involved in the process. So look at who has a kid, and they're on the school board, and it's more intimate to them. Because you understand the complaints that we got today, I got the train today about the buildings being so hot that people were no eating. One teacher was pregnant, and her mom was telling me she's sick. So when they're close to it, that's who you want to vote for. I always say that. When you have kids, you have a different perspective. So hopefully more parents get involved, and particularly in the school board process. And when we do get local control, I think there would be a whole different set of people running for office, and that's how it works.
Just very quickly, let me just say this to you. We, in this city, this community, we do not challenge our politicians, our candidates, very well. We don't have a lot of debates. We don't have a lot of debates where we can contrast people, they can go back and forth. That's our fault. So if you put those questions out there to the candidate, you should be able to ask them, why are you running? And why do you feel that you're qualified? And why haven't you finished whatever you see fit? But those questions need to be asked to candidates. Some candidates, unfortunately, should not be standing for election because they have not prepared themselves adequately for the office that they're seeking. But we don't ask them those questions. We don't challenge them. There aren't enough debates, and when they are put together, we don't show up. So the quality of the candidates that we often provide for our community isn't necessarily the best. So I would encourage parents and to go back and think about if you're concerned about the leadership, who's running, then you should be putting together your own community debate. Make them come. Make them answer those questions for you. And they will, if you get a debate, they'll come. They will come. But we're not doing that. We're not doing it as a community across the board. And that's a problem for us in terms of future leadership.
All right, so that wraps it up. I want to thank our panelists for coming out. Give a round of applause. Give yourselves a round of applause for coming out. And to our Facebook audience, thank you for chiming in. I'm curious to see how many hits we have. I want to see if I get more hits than Corey T. All right, it's a competition, Corey, I'm sorry. Again, so hopefully, get your friends out to vote. That should be a question that you should ask your friends and neighbors and family members. And are you planning to vote in the next election? Have a good night, and thank you for coming out.